What if that snoring sound isn't just a nighttime annoyance, but actually a biological alarm bell ringing about a specific nutrient deficiency in your body?
Welcome to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. Stay informed with quick, easy-to-listen summaries of our latest articles, perfect for when you're on the go. No reading required. Subscribe for free at Mercola.com for the latest health insights.
Hello, and welcome to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. Today, we are tearing down a very, very common misconception about sleep. We're going to look at why you or, maybe your partner might be sawing logs all night. And we're going to find that the cause isn't just about anatomy or weight. It's actually a fascinating story about biochemistry and muscle tone.
It's great to be here. And you're absolutely right. The mission for this deep dive is to, completely reframe how we all look at snoring. We usually treat it as a social problem,
right?
Or just an auditory nuisance.
Yeah, a joke, basically.
Exactly. But if we look at the cellular biology, specifically through the lens of vitamin D snoring, it transforms. It becomes a symptom of a much deeper physiological breakdown. It's really a sign that the body is losing its structural integrity during sleep.
Which is a huge claim. I mean, because usually when I read about snoring, the advice is so mechanical.
Buy a special pillow or sew a tennis ball into your pajamas, so you don't roll in your back.
Right. All the tricks.
Yeah. Or lose 10 pounds. It's all very surface level. But the research we're looking at today suggests the root cause might actually be floating in our bloodstream, or I guess not floating there.
That is the pivotal distinction. The mechanical fixes you just mentioned, they address the manifestation of the problem. They're just trying to muffle the noise or, force the airway open. But they don't ask why. Why is the airway collapsing in the first place? And that is where this vitamin D connection really comes in. We're looking at a specific failure of the neuromuscular system.
Okay, let's set the scene a little bit before we get into the heavy science, because I think most people they've resigned themselves to snoring. It's just, that's what Uncle Bob does. He's loud. We joke about it.
We do.
But what we're looking at today is pretty stark about this. Snoring is not normal.
It is absolutely not normal.
Yeah.
And normalizing it is frankly dangerous. When you hear snoring, what you're actually hearing is air turbulence. It's caused by a partial obstruction. The soft tissues in the throat, the pharynx, the soft palate, the tongue, they're actually collapsing inward.
And vibrating.
They're vibrating because the airway has narrowed.
So it's essentially a plumbing issue. The pipe is getting squeezed.
In a way, yes. But unlike a copper pipe, your airway is dynamic. It's made of muscle. And this is where we have to stop thinking of the throat as just a passive tube.
Okay.
It's an active muscular tunnel that requires constant energy and neurological signaling to stay open, especially when you're unconscious. If that signaling fails, or if the muscle tone fails, the tunnel collapses.
And that collapses the snore.
It is the snore. And if it collapses completely, that's apnea. That's when breathing actually stops entirely for a moment.
Right. So the leap we need to make today is connecting that collapsing tunnel to vitamin D. Because I'll be honest, when I think of vitamin D, I think of rickets. I think of bones.
Sure.
Maybe general immune health. I do not think about the muscles in my throat. How did we miss this link for so long?
I think we missed it because we compartmentalize the body.
Yeah.
We have sleep specialists looking at the throat, and we have nutritionists looking at blood levels, and they rarely talk to each other. But the biology is clear. Vitamin D isn't really a vitamin in the traditional sense. It's actually a steroid hormone.
Yeah.
It regulates the expression of thousands of genes. And critically, it is essential for skeletal muscle function.
Okay, let's drill down to that skeletal muscle function. We usually think of like biceps and quads when we hear that. But the throat, that's skeletal muscle too, right?
Exactly. The upper airway is surrounded by these complex skeletal muscles. We call them the dilator muscles.
Yeah.
Their entire job is to maintain patency or, openness.
Okay.
They have to fight against gravity and the suction pressure of your lungs just to keep that airway open while you sleep. It's a constant battle.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, these muscles need to be somewhat flexed or toned all the time just to keep the throat open?
Toned is the perfect word. We call it muscle tone. Even when you're relaxed, a healthy muscle has a kind of baseline level of tension. It's ready to work.
I see.
Now here's the mechanism. Vitamin D receptors are found all over skeletal muscle tissue. The vitamin plays a key role in calcium signaling within the muscle cells.
Calcium signaling, that's the trigger for a muscle to contract, isn't it?
It is, yes. Inside your muscle cells, you have this structure called the sarcoplasmic reticulum. It's like a little storage tank for calcium. For a muscle to contract or maintain its tone, that calcium has to be released efficiently. Vitamin D helps regulate that whole process. If you're deficient in vitamin D, that calcium handling becomes inefficient. The result is what we call hypotonia.
Hypotonia, low muscle tone.
Yes, the muscles become flaccid. They lose that structural rigidity.
That makes so much sense. So going back to the throat, if my vitamin D is tanked, my biceps might be a little weaker, which I might not even notice, but my throat muscles, those are critical.
You notice it in the throat because the margin for error is just so small. If your bicep is, say, 5% weaker, you just lift a little less.
Right.
If your airway muscles are 5% weaker, the tissue sags right into the airstream. The tent collapses.
I love that image. It's like we're trying to sleep inside a tent, but the poles, which are made of muscle, have kind of turned into rubber because they didn't get their nutrient fuel.
That is a perfect analogy. The vitamin D is the hardener for those poles. Without it, the structural integrity fails. And this is why we see chronic snoring in people who might otherwise look perfectly healthy. They might not be overweight, they might not have any anatomical defects, but biochemically, their muscles are starving for the hormone that keeps them taut.
This really explains why snoring gets worse as we age too, doesn't it? Because we know vitamin D production drops as we get older and we tend to stay inside more.
It's a massive compounding factor. We have an epidemic of vitamin D deficiency in the modern world. We live indoors. We've been told to fear the sun.
Yeah.
So our levels just plummet.
And at the same time,
simultaneously, we see rates of sleep disordered breathing just skyrocketing. It is not a coincidence. What we're looking at here is a systemic failure. The body is running low on a critical resource, and the first systems to show strain are often the ones that require constant, low-level maintenance like keeping an airway open for 8 hours straight.
and it's so insidious because it happens when we're most vulnerable. When we sleep, we're essentially paralyzed.
Yes, during REM sleep specifically, the body induces a state called atonia for the major limb muscles so we don't act out our dreams. But the breathing muscles, they must remain active. Now, if those breathing muscles are already weakened by a vitamin D deficiency, that natural relaxation during sleep just pushes them over the edge into a total collapse.
So we've got the mechanism. Low D equals bad calcium handling, which equals floppy muscles, which equals snoring. But I want to play devil's advocate for a second.
Go for it.
Is this a one-way street, or does the snoring itself actually make the vitamin D problem worse?
That is a very sharp question. And the answer is that it is likely bidirectional. When you snore or have sleep apnea, you are stressing the body. You are creating inflammation. And that inflammation can actually burn through your vitamin D stores even faster.
So it's a vicious cycle.
It's a complete feedback loop. You're low on D, so you snore. The snoring causes oxidative stress and inflammation, which then depletes your D further, making the muscles even weaker.
Which makes the snoring worse.
And on it goes.
That is terrifying, honestly.
No.
But it also offers a really clear off-ramp. Because if we can fix the input, the vitamin D, we might be able to break the cycle.
That's the hopeful part of this deep dive. Unlike, say, fixing a deviated septum, which requires surgery, or losing 50 pounds, which could take months or years, correcting a nutrient deficiency is biologically straightforward.
Let's talk about that correction, because I know there are very specific views on how we should be getting our vitamin D. We aren't just talking about popping a pill from the drugstore, are we?
No, and this is where the nuance really matters. The gold standard for vitamin D is not a supplement. It is sensible sun exposure.
Okay, why the distinction? If the molecule is the same, why does the delivery method matter so much?
Because when your skin is exposed to UVB rays from the sun, you aren't just making vitamin D, you're producing a whole host of other photoproducts. You're making cholesterol sulfate, you're producing nitric oxide, which helps lower blood pressure. It's a full spectrum biological event.
I see.
A supplement just isolates one molecule, but it misses that whole entourage effect of the sun.
So sitting in a windowless office all day and then taking a gummy vitamin might not be enough to fix that muscle tone in my throat.
It might help raise your blood levels on a test, sure, but you could be missing the other cofactors that really optimize muscle function. Plus, the body has a natural feedback mechanism with the sun to prevent toxicity. You don't have that with oral supplements.
Right. And speaking of levels, this is another area where the conventional wisdom seems to really lag behind. If I go to my doctor, they might say anything over 20 or 30 nanograms per milliliter is fine.
Mm-hmm.
Fine, but fine just means I don't have soft bones, right? It doesn't mean my throat muscles are like steel cable.
That is the difference between surviving and thriving. The clinical definition of sufficiency, often around 20 or 30 ngml, is designed to prevent acute diseases like rickets. But for optimal neuromuscular function, for that athletic responsiveness in the airway tissues, the research suggests you need to be much higher.
How much higher?
We're often looking at ranges between 60 to 80 NGML.
That is a massive difference. That's double or triple the average recommendation.
It is. And most people in the Western world they're nowhere near that. They're walking around with chronic low-level muscle weakness, and they don't realize it until they lie down at night and their airway starts to vibrate.
This brings up an interesting point about self-awareness. We think of muscle weakness as, I can't lift this heavy box. We rarely think about internal muscle weakness.
We don't have a sensory feedback loop for it. You can feel if your legs are tired. You cannot feel if your pharyngeal dilator muscles are 20% weaker than they should be. The only symptom is the snore.
The snore is the check engine light.
Precisely. And sadly, most people just smash the light instead of checking the engine. They wear strips, they use sprays, they sleep in separate rooms, they silence the alarm.
I want to circle back to something you mentioned earlier about the inflammatory aspect. If someone is listening to this and they are a chronic snorer, or maybe they live with one, what else should they be looking for? Because if this is a systemic vitamin D issue, the snoring can't be the only thing going wrong.
You're absolutely right to broaden the scope. If you have low vitamin D causing hypotonia in the throat, you likely have issues elsewhere. You might notice increased susceptibility to respiratory infections. And not just because of the immune aspect of vitamin D, but because the airway structure itself is compromised. You might notice more aches and pains, things often misdiagnosed as fibromyalgia or just getting old.
Muscle pain, that sort of bone-deep ache.
Yes. That is a classic symptom of vitamin D deficiency osteomalacia, which is the softening of bones, but also myopathy, which is muscle weakness and pain. If you have a creaky body and a loud snore, those two things are likely cousins. They're coming from the same root deficiency.
That is a real light bulb moment. I think so many people treat these as separate entries in their medical file. Patient reports back pain, patient reports snoring. No one's drawing the line connecting them.
And that is the tragedy of modern specialized medicine. We treat the parts and we ignore the whole. The approach here is about cellular wisdom, understanding that the cell doesn't care which organ it's in. A muscle cell in the throat and a muscle cell in the back both need the same calcium signaling regulated by the same hormone.
So let's get practical for the listener. They're hearing this, they're thinking, okay, I snore, I work inside, I feel a bit creaky. What is the first step? Is it just go outside?
Well, the first step is data. You cannot manage what you do not measure. You really need to get your 25-hydroxy vitamin D levels tested. And don't just wait for your annual physical. You can order these tests yourself in many places. You need to know your number.
And if that number is, say, 25.
Then you have some work to do. The ideal strategy, as we discussed, is sensible sun exposure, getting your skin into the game. But obviously, depending on where you live and the season, that isn't always possible.
Right. If you're in Minnesota in February, the sun isn't doing much for you.
Exactly. In those cases, oral supplementation is necessary, but it has to be done carefully. You have to balance it with other nutrients like vitamin K2 and magnesium.
Yeah.
You can't just flood the system with D without the supporting cast.
Okay.
Magnesium, in particular, is required to convert vitamin D into its active form. If you take D but you're magnesium deficient, well, not much happens.
Which is a whole other deep dive, I'm sure. But it's worth noting. It's a symphony, not a solo act.
Exactly. But the primary takeaway regarding the snoring is this. Don't just assume your anatomy is broken. Don't assume you need surgery or that you're just destined to be a loud sleeper. Assume first that your biochemistry is out of balance.
I really like that perspective. It puts the power back in your hands. Anatomy feels like destiny. Biochemistry feels like a dial you can actually turn.
It is a dial. And it's a dial that affects everything. When you fix the vitamin D levels to stop the snoring, you aren't just fixing the sleep. You're fixing the immune system, the bone density, mood regulation, cardiovascular health. The cessation of snoring is just the visible, or I guess audible proof that the whole system is coming back online.
It's the silence of success.
That's a very good way to put it.
Before we wrap up, I just want to touch on the chronic part of this one more time. Chronic snoring. Are we saying that a single bad night of sleep doesn't really matter?
Oh, everyone has a bad night. Of course. If you have a cold, if you're exhausted, if you slept in a terrible position, you might snore. That's a mechanical obstruction due to circumstance.
Got it.
We're talking about the person who snores every single night, regardless of position, regardless of how tired they are. That consistency indicates a structural failure. That is the chronic aspect that points directly to a nutrient deficiency.
So if it's predictable, it's likely chemical.
That is a very safe heuristic to use, yes.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. I think for a lot of listeners, this connects dots they didn't even know were on the same page. We've gone from snoring is annoying to snoring is a sign of cellular starvation.
It is. And it serves as a reminder that the body is always talking to us. The symptoms we hate, the pain, the noise, the fatigue, they're really requests for help.
We just have to learn the language.
We do. And in this case, the language is vitamin D.
So, to summarize where we've been, snoring is caused by the collapse of throat muscles. Those muscles rely on vitamin D to regulate calcium and maintain their tone. Most of us are deficient in vitamin D, which leads to a floppy airway. And fixing the deficiency, preferably through sun or proper supplementation, can restore that tone and, well, quiet the noise.
That is the perfect summary.
Is there one final thought you want to leave our listeners with? Something for them to chew on?
We focused heavily on the throat today, but I want people to zoom out. If a simple nutrient deficiency can physically weaken the muscles, keeping your airway open, if it can cause that kind of mechanical failure in your throat, what other mechanical failures in your body might actually be chemical problems in disguise? What other parts of you are sagging or slowing down or breaking simply because they don't have the fuel to hold themselves up?
That is a profound question. It really makes you look at every single symptom differently. It's not just wear and tear, it might be an empty gas tank.
Right.
Thank you so much for guiding us through this. It's been a fascinating look at the hidden connections in our biology.
It was my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to Dr. Mercola's Cellular Wisdom. See you in the next episode.
Looking for trusted health wisdom you can hold in your hands? Discover the life-changing books of Dr. Mercola at joyhousepublishing.com. These titles bring decades of natural health research into practical steps for better energy, stronger immunity, and clearer thinking. Take charge of your health with guidance rooted in science and experience. Visit joyhousepublishing.com now and claim your bonuses while they are available.
Thanks for watching. Subscribe now and click the notification bell so you never miss an update. See you in the next video.